Hi there. My name is Thomas Hale. 20 years ago, on what was supposed to be a family vacation, my own son and an ex-wife left me stranded at an airport. No goodbye, no explanation, just a cruel laugh and a plane ticket to nowhere. People say time heals everything, but the truth is, some wounds teach you who you truly are. I was myself at LAX International Airport amidst the sea of Christmas greeters in 2005. Only difference was I had no one left to greet. The terminal buzzed with warmth that didn't belong to me. Families hugging laughter ricocheting off tiled floors, children gripping candy canes. But for me, Thomas Hale, it was just another stage for the humiliation I hadn't yet accepted. 45 minutes ago, my wife Angela and son Brian had said they were stepping out to grab burgers. "We'll be right back, Dad." "Just hang tight," Brian had said. I had nodded, smiling like a fool. I had planned this trip for 2 years. Hawaii, our first full family vacation since I retired from 34 years in aerospace engineering. The kind of trip you hope your family remembers you for. But the time ticked. The crowd thinned. Announcements cycled through gates. My flight number blinked departed on the overhead board. And the seat I had paid for the row of three was taken. Gone. My suitcase was gone too. Not misplaced. Taken. The only things left with me were a small duffel and the leather wallet I carried habitually, even though everything important had already flown without me. I dialed Brian, straight to voicemail. Angela, same. I called again, then again. 15 missed calls, no responses. I stood there watching strangers embrace, reunite, carry memories home. None of them were mine. Snow drifted outside the terminal's glass panels, barely visible in the bright, sterile lights. I walked out, the duffel strap cutting into my shoulder. Each step away from gate 37 felt like one into a void. Outside, I pulled my coat tighter. My breath fogged in the cold, and the Los Angeles night, unusually sharp for December, sank into my bones. I sat in the parking lot for a long time. Just sat, hoping they'd return. That this was a miscommunication, a bad joke. That they'd pull up laughing. "You really thought we'd leave you, Dad?" They didn't. Eventually, I drove home, or at least I tried to. When I reached my old brick house on Norwalk Street, the place I paid the mortgage on for 27 years, I noticed the porch lights were off. The wreath was missing. The lock clicked strangely when I turned my key. Changed. Confused, I checked my phone. One new message. "Angela, it's time you learn how to be independent." That was it. No explanation, no anger, no remorse. I backed away from the door and stood on the porch looking at the neighborhood I had shoveled snow for every winter, repaired fences for, and babysat dogs when others went on vacation. Now I was a stranger in it. Inside my car, I turned the heat on full blast and sat with the engine running. My fingers shook, not from cold, but from a dawning clarity. I opened my wallet, took out the photo wedged behind my insurance card, our wedding day 1978. Angela enlaced me in a too-tight tux. I held it near the heater vents. It curled, smoked, and blackened before catching flame. I watched it burn in the ashtray. Then I opened Facebook. I hadn't used it much, but Brian had once tagged me in a Father's Day post. I saw it instantly. A new update. His most recent post. It read, "The old man always thought he ran the show. Let's see how he survives this game." There were likes, comments, laughter, heart emojis. Someone replied with a gif of a man being left in the rain. My hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white. It wasn't just abandonment. I was a punchline. The kind of public humiliation you don't come back from, not without a plan. I stared at the snow outside the windshield, now blanketing the street. The dashboard clock read 12:14 a.m. I hadn't slept in 20 hours. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out an old city map, the one I'd kept from my early work commutes. I unfolded it slowly, drawing X's near a few bus stops, a public library, and an old warehouse I once worked out of. It wasn't much, but it was something. Strategy begins when survival depends on it. I noticed the watch on my wrist, a battered Casio. Brian had gifted it to me on my 60th birthday. I slid it off. 2 days later, I sold it at a pawn shop in Santa Monica. The man put it in a dusty red box stacked behind brass rings and faded baseball cards. That night I didn't have a bed, but I had clarity. That night I slept in my car. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be left behind. But I also began to understand what I needed wasn't pity, what I needed was strategy to survive. 20 years later, they came back as if they'd never left me stranded at an airport. And perhaps to them, Thomas Hale was still the fool who waited with a suitcase full of hope. My apartment in the Skyline Residences overlooked downtown LA, a far cry from the two-bedroom house they locked me out of 2 decades ago. Every surface inside was curated clean, minimal quiet, just like I had become. The intercom buzzed that morning. I knew who it was even before the concierge said their names. "Mr. Hale," he said almost hesitant. "You have visitors. A Mrs. Angela Hale and a Mr. Brian Hale." I paused. "Send them up." The knock came minutes later. I didn't rush. I opened the door with the kind of restraint one reserves for ghosts. Angela smiled first, tight, deliberate. Brian followed, flashing the kind of grin you wear when you're selling something. "Dad," Brian said. "Wow. I didn't know you were living like this," Angela chimed in. "It's beautiful, Thomas. So modern, so refined." They stepped inside without invitation, eyes scanning every corner like real estate agents on a tour. I didn't stop them. I simply gestured to the leather armchairs near the bay windows. "Tea?" They nodded. I made jasmine. I kept the silence. So Brian started leaning forward. "How have you been all these years?" "We tried to reach out." "Life gets messy, huh?" Angela added. "We've all changed, Thomas. Mistakes were made, but here we are sitting together again." I stirred my tea slowly. No reactions, no raised voice. I had learned not to bleed in shark water. "I heard you were doing quite well," Brian continued, eyes flicking toward the antique bookshelf, where framed certificates sat beside a financial magazine with my name printed in a corner. "Investments, real estate. Maybe a little crypto," Angela sighed theatrically. "My husband, well, second husband, passed last year. It's been hard, financially, emotionally. I had to sell the Tahoe house." The tea was still too hot. I blew on it gently, then looked at them with a faint smile. "So, you're here for the money," Brian blinked. Angela tilted her head, a laugh forced out. "Oh, Thomas. Don't be so cynical," she said. Brian added, "We're family. We just wanted to reconnect." "Of course," I said, standing. "Unfortunately, I have an appointment soon. Next time, give me a heads up." I walked to the door. They hesitated before following, both taking one last long glance around. On their way out, just as the elevator dinged, I heard Brian whisper to Angela, not knowing the frame by the door had a listening device tucked behind the glass. "He really thinks he can keep all this. Let him." "We'll see," Angela murmured back. "Leave it to me." The door shut behind them with a muted click. I stood there for a moment. The jasmine scent still hung in the air. Then I turned to the console beneath the frame, tapped a hidden button, and watched the recording replay. Their voices, their intent clear as crystal. I opened the closet, unlocked the fireproof safe, and pulled out a file. Inside were years of receipts, contracts, and backup drives. I had waited for this day. I walked to the living room, sat with the day's paper. Page 6, Lisa Duarte, appointed chief editor at Channel 9 News. I circled her name with a pen. She used to be a struggling journalism student. I once wrote her a recommendation letter for a scholarship. She had said she owed me. Now perhaps it was time to collect. That night I sold Brian's birthday watch again. The new version, another pawn shop, another dusty box. They thought I was the same man from the terminal in 2005. But they were about to experience something else entirely. I had prepared for this day a long time ago. But if they thought I was still the same, then they were in for the biggest shock of their lives. If I wanted to reclaim everything I had to cross a fortress built not of brick or steel, but of data leverage and walls that whispered. It had been a week since Brian and Angela walked into my apartment with fake smiles and real intent. That gave me 6 days to reawaken every measure I had put in place over 2 decades. Measures not meant to protect, but to retaliate. I sat in my study that morning, blinds drawn, halfway ambient light, flickering over shelves lined with old hard drives and labeled USBs. The room was silent, save for the soft clicks of my keyboard. I pulled up the home security footage, date-stamped, encrypted, unedited, the moment Brian leaned toward Angela at the door. The exact sentence, he really thinks he can keep all this, clear as day. I saved the file under a new folder, Strike Assets, Phase 1. A knock on the side entrance. Ethan, my neighbor and closest confidant, stepped in. Got something you'll want to see, he said, holding out a manila envelope. Angela visited Eastmark Bank. Not under her name, though, under Denise Chambers. I recognized the walk, not the alias. I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of deposit slips, a schedule of wire transfers, and most curiously, a life insurance policy with me listed as a prior beneficiary, canceled in 2011. Thanks, Ethan. Keep watching, especially near anything legal. I hear Brian's been pacing outside 2 law offices this week. He chuckled. Already got eyes. We drank black coffee like old spies before going our separate ways. Later that afternoon, I walked into a cafe tucked between 2 bookstores. A quiet place. Not trendy enough for influencers, not hidden enough for criminals. Lisa Duarte sat in the far booth, tapping her phone with one hand, espresso in the other. She looked up instantly, recognizing me. Mr. Hale, she smiled. Or should I call you Thomas the Ghost? You vanished after my scholarship interview. I didn't vanish. I waited for the right moment to resurface. She raised a brow. And now is right, I have a story, I said, sliding into the booth. It involves betrayal fraud and 2 people who think they still control the narrative. Her eyes lit up with reporter's instinct. How good is it if you want it? I replied, it'll make your network's front page. But I want exclusivity. She leaned forward. Show me a taste. I pulled out a flash drive and slid it across. On it, a silent video from 2010, Brian Young, an overconfident, signing a blank sheet of paper at a family dinner laughing. A harmless prank at the time. But Angela had scanned that very page, manipulated it, and used it in the 2012 transfer of deed for a property that was once in my name. Lisa watched the clip in silence. Paper trails are powerful, I said. She looked up. I'll need more. But if this holds up and if you give me full access, I can make sure they answer for this. Publicly. Nationally. Then we're aligned, I said. But I play this game by my rules. Before leaving, I slid another document across the table, this one addressed to a lawyer in New York. A private trust activation form. I had no intention of letting Brian or Angela touch a single dollar, regardless of any court battle they tried to wage. Later that night, while monitoring digital chatter, I saw Brian's post go live. We're worried. Dad's been acting strange. Might need a legal guardian soon. A photo followed me, sitting alone on a park bench, staring off, filtered in black and white for dramatic effect. He was planting seeds of incompetence, a classic setup. But he forgot one thing: I had walls that recorded, wires that remembered, people who owed me favors, and more importantly, nothing left to lose, and a plan finally in motion. It's time to play their game, but this time by my rules. You want my case, fine, but let's make sure your hands are clean. No forged signatures, no stolen identities. Deal. 2 days before the court hearing. The office of Parker and Slate LLP was silent, save for the rustle of paper and the hum of encrypted drives being scanned and logged. I sat at the head of a long oak table, my fingers resting on a leather dossier labeled in red response petition for guardianship. Hale T. Parker entered, glasses lowered, gray suit crisp. He was the kind of attorney you never saw advertising on bus benches because clients like me made sure his name stayed off billboards and inside powerful circles. I reviewed everything he said, the financials, the audio files, the video. He slid his laptop over to me. On screen, a 2012 recording of Brian laughing over beers with college friends. Used my dad's name. Opened the account like it was nothing. Dumb old man didn't even notice. I didn't blink. I'd heard it 100 times already. We can push for criminal identity fraud, but if we go that route, Parker said it's a public execution. I nodded. That's the point. Lisa's text chimed in. Story at its done. Scheduled to air 8:30 a.m. Title locked, The Man They Left Behind. You ready? I had waited 20 years to be ready. I opened my briefcase and removed the next weapon, a scanned copy of Angela's 2011 real estate transfer, forged, using the signature Brian left on that blank sheet of paper a decade prior. Next came the witness statement signed hours ago by Ethan, confirming Angela had used a false name at Eastmark Bank. We even had security footage. And finally the note, handwritten, faded at the edges but legible. I don't need you. I never did. Don't come looking. Angela Deck, 24, 2005. I handed it to Parker. He read it, then looked up. This, this isn't just evidence. It's motive. You've been preparing this counterattack for years. No, I corrected. I've been preparing it for the right moment, which is tomorrow. He exhaled. Then let's go for the kill. He began drafting a dual motion, one to dispute the guardianship request as fraudulent and another to open an investigation into misuse of personal data, financial manipulation, and psychological coercion. At the same time, Lisa and her team cued their feature segment to go live at the exact minute court proceedings began. The world will be watching, she had said. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Later that evening, I reviewed one last piece, a printed email from a young attorney representing Angela. His name, Raymond Pierce. I remembered him, a law student in 2010. He had once approached me for an internship. I declined. He hadn't taken it well. Apparently, revenge aged like wine. He was now pushing the narrative that I had grown unstable, unfit to manage my estate. His plan have Angela declared legal guardian of both my person and my assets. All based on a single photo Brian had staged me sitting alone, staring blankly at the horizon. I smiled, because tomorrow they would walk into court thinking I was defenseless. They'd see a frail old man with nothing but a coat and a soft voice. What they wouldn't see until too late was the iron beneath that voice, the vault behind that coat, and the cameras, recordings, and witnesses lined up like dominoes. This wasn't just about proving my sanity. It was about revealing their corruption. Parker closed his briefcase. Everything's set. I stood. Good, I said. Because tomorrow, they won't just lose a hearing. They'll lose their faces on national television. I used to think the most humiliating moment of my life was being left behind at an airport. But today I saw something even more disgraceful, a father revealing the rot inside his own bloodline in front of the law. It was 8:30 a.m. sharp. Outside the San Diego Civil Courthouse, media vans lined the streets. Inside, rows of seats were filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and more than a few sharp-suited attorneys pretending to check emails while watching the drama unfold. I walked in alone. No legal entourage, just a gray suit, a black briefcase, and the calm of someone who had built a case not with anger, but with evidence. Across the aisle sat Brian and Angela. Brian smirked confidently, dressed like a man who thought he owned the verdict. Angela wore pearls, her hands folded, eyes darting only once toward mine, then away like a thief avoiding a security camera. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a hawk-like stare, opened proceedings. Mr. Brian Hale, please state your petition. Brian stood. My father, Thomas Hale, is no longer mentally fit to manage his finances or well-being. I request legal guardianship for his own protection. He added with theatrical grief, he's isolated, delusional, and vulnerable to manipulation. I didn't react. I let him finish digging. Angela chimed in softly. We love him. We just want to care for him. The judge turned to me. Mr. Hale, do you have a response? I stood. My mind is intact, Your Honor. In fact, it's the only thing that kept me alive for 20 years. I handed over 2 documents. One was a recent neurological assessment from Dr. Rajani, a certified cognitive specialist. The second, a notarized declaration from 2 longtime neighbors confirming my independence and stability. The judge skimmed the pages, raised an eyebrow. These seem thorough. More is coming, I said. From my briefcase, I produced a digital recorder. Please play Exhibit A. The courtroom filled with the crackling audio from 2012. Brian's voice used my dad's name. Opened the account like it was nothing. Dumb old man didn't even notice. Whispers erupted. Angela turned pale. Lisa's live broadcast was synced perfectly. On national television, her special segment, The Man They Left Behind, aired with split-screen analysis, my courtroom battle on one side, and a montage of interviews, documents, and timeline reconstructions on the other. Lisa's voice. This is not just a family dispute. It is a blueprint for financial abuse, for betrayal, and for what happens when the truth comes back recorded. Inside the courtroom, I continued. Your Honor, I present Exhibit B, a scanned document showing Angela forged a real estate transaction using my signature. And Exhibit C, a letter Angela wrote in 2005. I read it aloud. I don't need you. I never did. Don't come looking. Angela, the judge turned sharply. Mrs. Hale, do you deny writing this? Angela opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Outside, the crowd watching Lisa's stream exploded online. Hashtags trended within minutes. The man they left, Chaka your airport reckoning, Chaka your father V's blood. The judge straightened. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied. Based on submitted evidence, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential charges related to identity fraud and financial misrepresentation. Brian stood eyes wild. You're my father, I faced him finally. And you, I said, left me. At an airport. In 2005. You didn't lose a father. You discarded one. The room fell silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause. But I wasn't finished. I didn't vanish because I got lost. Brian, I walked away because I had to find the man you two tried to bury. People kept asking me, why didn't you ever go back? The truth is, I did return, just not to them. It had been 2 weeks since the courtroom fell silent, and the world for a moment remembered a man they once would have walked past at the airport. Lisa invited me onto her primetime talk show. The set was polished, her voice as confident as ever. This isn't just a story of justice, she told the audience. It's about memory, dignity, and how sometimes the road home isn't about going back, but moving forward. She turned to me, her tone softer. If you could return to that moment in 2005, would you do anything differently? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and handed her a small USB. This is the last footage from the airport. I've kept it all these years. The screen behind us lit up. It showed me 20 years younger sitting alone in Terminal 5. My face stoic, unmoving. Planes took off. Families reunited. No one came for me. And then I stood. No outburst. No tears. Just a quiet nod, a hand on my old suitcase. And I walked out of frame. The clip faded to black, leaving behind only the words, he never looked back. The audience clapped. Some cried. Lisa did too. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt at peace. Later that week, a foundation offered me a medal for social resilience. I politely declined. Instead, I drove to the outskirts of San Diego to a quiet cemetery where my mother rested beneath a crooked oak tree. She'd once told me, never let anyone decide your worth for you. I stood beside her headstone and whispered, I didn't go back to the past, Mom, but I did come back to myself. Now I live in a modest apartment near the coast. Ethan drops by most evenings. We drink tea on the balcony, sometimes watching the sun dip beneath the waves in silence. Angela resigned from her firm. Brian is under federal investigation for fraud. The world moved on, and so did I. Lisa's book, Gate 26, hit the shelves this month. She sent me the first copy with a handwritten note for the man who taught me what silence can say. One final question lingered. Lisa asked me during our last call, if you could say one thing to them now, what would it be? I paused, then said quietly, nothing at all. They've heard enough. And I'm finally living. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.